Stop right there. If you think you've heard every possible infidelity story, think again. What I'm about to tell you is not what you expect. It's deeper, more intense, and it will make you question everything you thought you knew about cheating, forbidden confessions, and the limits of desire. And trust me, once you start listening, you won't be able to stop, just like I couldn't. But before we dive into this insane, real story of infidelity, I need you to do something important. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and drop a comment below. Tell me, have you ever felt a desire so overwhelming that stopping was never an option? I bet you have. And if you're curious to know what happens next, stay with me, because this story, it's just getting started. It started as a game, a delicate dance of stolen glances and barely their touches, the kind that send electricity through your veins. I could feel his eyes tracing my every move, waiting, anticipating. The thrill of knowing I had complete control over the moment was intoxicating. Have you ever felt that surge of power? That undeniable magnetism when you know someone is utterly captivated by you? It was in the way I adjusted my hair, the slow way my lips curled into a knowing smile, the casual but intentional brush of my fingers against my collarbone. Anticipation is a wicked thing. It teases, it lingers, it drives you to the edge, and then pulls back just enough to leave you wanting more. I played with that tension like a seasoned performer, letting the silence stretch between us, thick with possibilities. His breathing changed, his posture tensed, subtle, but unmistakable signs that the moment had taken hold of him. And yet, I did nothing to break it. I let the hunger simmer, knowing the longer it burned, the more consuming it would be when it finally ignited. There's a moment right before everything shifts, before desire turns into action, before hesitation crumbles under the weight of inevitability. I saw it in his eyes, the battle between restraint and surrender. I leaned in just slightly, close enough for him to feel my breath against his skin, but not close enough to let him have what he wanted. A whisper of a moment, a promise of something just out of reach. He was hooked, caught in a web of tension I had spun with the most innocent of gestures. And then, just as he reached that tipping point, I pulled away, just enough to keep him chasing. Because that's the secret, isn't it? The power isn't in the moment itself, but in the promise of what's to come. And as I turned, allowing him just one last lingering glance, I knew the night was far from over. I could already feel the shift in the air, the kind that turns quiet anticipation into something far more dangerous. I had come here to be alone, to escape, to breathe, to lose myself in the quiet embrace of solitude. But fate has a strange sense of humor, doesn't it? One moment, I was sipping my drink, enjoying the stillness, and the next, I felt it. 5 sets of eyes settling on me, heavy with curiosity and something else entirely. I didn't have to look to know. That kind of attention has a presence, a weight that fills the space like an unspoken invitation. I stole a glance, just enough to confirm what I already felt. They weren't the kind of men who blended into the background. No, they commanded the space around them, exuding that rugged, untamed energy that made the air feel thick with possibility. The way they watched me, it wasn't just appreciation. It was intrigue. It was the beginning of a story that neither of us had planned, but one we were all willing to write. And just like that, solitude became a distant memory. It's funny how quickly the mood can shift. One moment, I was lost in my own world, content in the silence, and the next, I was the center of a storm I had no intention of escaping. There was something intoxicating about knowing I had their attention, about feeling the pull of something unscripted, unpredictable. My movements became slower, more deliberate, not out of calculation, but because I could feel the tension thickening with every passing second. And then, without a single word, I knew tonight would be different. This wasn't just a passing glance, a fleeting moment of curiosity. This was the start of something unspoken, yet undeniable. And as I met their eyes once more, the night stretched out before me like an open road, daring me to see just how far I was willing to go. The air between us was thick, charged with something primal, something inevitable. I hadn't invited him with words. I hadn't needed to. A glance over my shoulder, a slow turn on my heel, and the silent dare in my eyes had been enough. He followed. Of course he followed. Some moments don't require explanation. They just are. And as the door clicked shut behind us, sealing us away from the outside world, the last traces of restraint crumbled between us. It was the kind of passion that didn't ask permission. The kind that ignites before you even realize you've struck the match. His hands found me with a hunger that mirrored my own, gripping, claiming, exploring with an urgency that left no room for hesitation. And I welcomed it. No second-guessing, no carefully measured steps, just raw, unfiltered desire. It was the kind of encounter that makes you forget time exists, where every touch, every gasp, every movement feels like a secret being written into the skin. There was no hesitation, no games, just the unrelenting crash of two forces colliding, both unwilling to hold back. His breath was fire against my skin, his touch a command I had no desire to resist. It wasn't about words or promises. It was about the now, about the moment, about taking what was already ours the second our eyes met across that room. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. Only this, only us. And yet, even as I lay there, breathless, spent, I knew this wasn't an ending. No, this was merely the first chapter. The night was far from over, and the shadows outside whispered promises I wasn't ready to ignore. Because some stories don't stop at a single encounter. Some pull you in deeper, making you crave the next page before you've even finished the last. The air was electric, pulsing with an unspoken rhythm that only we understood. I could feel them, watching, waiting, caught between restraint and the inevitable pull of desire. But make no mistake, this moment belonged to me. I moved through them slowly, deliberately, letting the tension coil tighter with every glance, every teasing touch. This wasn't about rushing to the climax. It was about the build, the unbearable anticipation that made every second feel like an eternity. And they hung on my every move, spellbound, caught in the gravity of something far greater than any of us had planned. There's something intoxicating about knowing you hold all the power. Not because it was given, but because it was taken, claimed, demanded without apology. I could see it in their eyes, that delicious struggle between patience and hunger, the silent plea for permission they weren't sure they needed. But I made them wait. Oh, I made them wait. Because pleasure is never just about the act itself. It's about the tension, the restraint, the slow unraveling of control until there's nothing left to hold on to. I traced my fingers along a jawline here, a collarbone there, letting my touch linger just long enough to leave them breathless. Every gasp, every sharp intake of breath was fuel, a confirmation that I was exactly where I was meant to be. And as their hands finally found me, as the room became a blur of heat and motion, I knew we had crossed a threshold. There was no turning back now, not that any of us wanted to, because this moment wasn't just about desire. It was about surrendering to something bigger than any single one of us. It was about giving in to the storm we had all felt brewing from the start. And as the night stretched on, as every lingering touch turned into something deeper, more urgent, I couldn't help but wonder, how far could we go before we shattered completely? There's a moment, right before everything explodes, where time slows, where the weight of every touch, every gasp, every desperate movement crashes down all at once. I felt it building inside me, a tension coiling so tight it threatened to snap. My body was no longer my own. It belonged to the moment, to the electricity in the air, to the unrelenting hunger that had led me here. And then release. A shattering, breath-stealing, world-altering surrender that left me trembling, weightless, utterly lost in the aftermath. I barely recognized myself in that instant. The version of me that existed before this night had unraveled, stripped away layer by layer until only raw sensation remained. Every inch of my skin burned with memory, every nerve still vibrating with the echoes of what had just happened. And yet, there was no regret, no shame. Only the undeniable truth that I had stepped into something far greater than indulgence. I had embraced a part of me I never dared acknowledge before. As I lay there, my breath still unsteady, a single thought pulsed through my mind. How many others crave this but never allow themselves to have it? How many hesitate, afraid of judgment, afraid of what surrendering to pure, unfiltered desire might reveal about them. We spend so much time battling our impulses, pretending we don't want what we want, until a moment like this makes denial impossible. I had stopped fighting it, and in doing so, I had found something liberating. The night had given me something I never expected. And as I stared at the ceiling, my body still buzzing with the aftershocks of everything we had shared, I couldn't help but wonder, if I had the chance, would I do it all over again? The answer was already forming on my lips. But that's the thing about desire, it never truly fades. It only waits for the next opportunity to consume you completely. So now, let me ask you, how far would you go if nothing was holding you back? If there were no rules, no consequences, just pure, unfiltered desire? Most people spend their lives suppressing their cravings, pretending they don't feel the pull of temptation. But what happens when you finally give in? When you stop resisting and let yourself feel everything? Maybe you've been in a moment like this before. Maybe you've wanted to, but fear kept you from crossing that invisible line. But here's the truth. We all have that side of us. The one that craves what's off limits, that wonders what if. The question is, will you ever let yourself truly explore it? Or will you always wonder what could have been? If this story made you think, tell me in the comments, what do you believe about temptation and control? And don't forget, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because trust me, this is just the beginning.